All right. Now I believe this means we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes and sorts and sizes and persuasions, welcome to another Monday morning tech chat show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, aka SomeGadgetGuy, the SGG of this terribly named podcast. Horrible name for a podcast. But it's the QA that we really care about. It's the question and answer. I love seeing all of your lovely usernames in the live chat today. Aditya, Dave Burns, Simon Says Hypno, Gary the Fireman, Gadget Guy 2020, Fat Produce, Kappa Cash, Chatty Boy, Heikis, and Goog We Trust. I'm probably missing some other... Lenny82, Fro Photos. We've got a great crew jumping in already. Awesome Possum, Dustadore, and already this morning with the drama. So much drama this morning. But we've got a killer lineup of news. I have a ton of housekeeping to get through because last week just kind of rocked my socks. And so many things that I kind of want to dive into. A hyped up new announcement from Nintendo, fresh off the news feeds this morning, reactions to other reviews, some political news, FTC news, Microsoft and Google are going to be fighting again, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Someday I'll be able to come up with my own jokes and not just rip off the Ghostbusters. So, first, just to kick this off, if you're of the United States persuasion, I hope you had a lovely July 4th weekend. We're doing the Monday morning tech chat show on a Tuesday. It's like the Lego movie joke. It's Taco Tuesday, but on a Friday. I had to take a day off. I had family in town. Like I said, this last week, the week before, kind of rocked my socks. I'm hoping to do some family stuff next week. So this week is going to be pretty busy again, too. So I took a day. Even someone as workaholic as me, and sadly, I was still doing a whole bunch of social media stuff and some video production stuff, but we delayed the podcast a day just to get a little bit of extra family time and rest time in. So I hope everyone in the United States, if you celebrated July 4th, that you had a lovely time with family and friends and good food. And if you weren't in the United States and this was just a normal weekend for you, I also hope that you had a lovely weekend celebrating family and friends and good food. The triple F, family, friends, and food. I really feel every weekend should be a heartfelt celebration of those three topics. So, JMX Warrior, I forgot about USA Holiday Day. I was waiting at 5 p.m. for the notification. Oh no. See, and the thing is, like, this is one of those issues. Again, we're going to be talking about the wrap up, the winner of the Amazon gift card contest, and I'm working with that startup. And how we have conversations on different platforms, there's no way for me to put a message out on Twitch that I know of. So if you're used to catching me on Twitch on Monday mornings and I decide to take a day off, I tweeted it, so it was on Twitter that I was taking the day off, but that doesn't help on Twitch. The tying together all of these disparate social media services where conversations are happening all over the place. It's really heady stuff. And I try to put the message out there and keep you all informed. But what happens on my blog is what's different than what happens on Twitter, which is different than what happens on Twitch, which is different than what happens on YouTube. So Dave Burns, nothing helps on Twitch. Well, again, I hope everyone had a lovely time. My brother was in town, and my daughter just absolutely adores Uncle Marcus, some gadget bruh. And we failed at finding fireworks. Thankfully, we live in a neighborhood now where not too far distantly, there was a pretty bad fire out here. So the community here is not about people going rogue and setting off their own fireworks. The hills can go up in flames. So thankfully, we didn't have any issues with that. But we could hear fireworks going off somewhere nearby. We could hear it. We just couldn't see where they were coming from. So unfortunately, we didn't get that. But we did up some delicious brats and sauerkraut and a Southwest salad and tons of potato chips and lots of snacks. We got those gummy stars from C's Candy. So good. The sour stars. I maybe went through half the bag myself. And now I need to get back into my workout regimen. We added a new channel on the Discord just to encourage me to get my step count in. Oh, and Gary the Fireman. Hold on, let me take a sip of water here. Gary the Fireman has given out 194 gift subs on this channel, hooking up ER1980 and Mr. Malignance. Thank you so much, Gary the Fireman. Again, the support, I'm always appreciative of helping this channel out, keeping production rolling, and then also hooking people up. So that is very kind of you, and I very much appreciate it. Sorry, I'm catching some of the live chat. Before I'm gonna be off my game. I delay the podcast one day and I forget how the audio settings in OBS works. So let me get into housekeeping so we can get into the show proper. Like I said, we've got so much news to cover, and I want to make the second half of the podcast, the gadget block, just a little bit longer because we've got OnePlus news, we've got Nintendo news, Sony news. Dr. Ian from Anantech just dropped a bombshell in my lap on OnePlus this morning. So we've got so much to do. Housekeeping. Dave Burns is saying 24 minutes for housekeeping. I'm going to try and do it in a third of that. Because like I said, I did a lot. So we're just going to run. I'm not going to editorialize like I normally do. That's probably a lie. I'm probably lying to you right now. All right, here we go. Ready? Number 1. I love getting to spend time with Panasonic Toughbooks, and they sent over their FZ-S1 Android tablet, kind of replacing a lot of these other smaller form factor industrial and military use tablets. I did not show it in the video, but I scratched the screen protector on this tablet, and the tablet itself was fine. So this is a very super rugged piece of kit, and I wish we could have more consumer solutions that were built a little bit more like this. I've got the full review, full video, full hands-on, because it's not really a consumer-facing product, but it's something that I wish we could crib more from. Also, this one was kind of a biggie for me. This is 2 parts. This is my first impressions on Windows 11. There's a whole new UI. My experience is firing up the Microsoft App Store for the first time in a long time. Not for the very first time, but with this new build of Windows 11, kind of going over like the new File Explorer, and generally, I've been very impressed. This is still in the developer beta ring, so this isn't something that's out for general consumers just yet. Excuse me, but I'm very excited at what we're seeing already. Like, it definitely needs a little more polish, and there are some funky little bits, like where different generations of UI still clash. That's always going to be a thing of Windows, I guess. But the second half of this video is a bit of commentary just on how rough Microsoft gets this kind of criticism for trying to advance Windows, or at the same time, like, Apple can break everything, and we're just happy to wait for Apple to fix everything. And if Microsoft could take a fresh start on an operating system, I feel we'd get the super awesome, polished, pretty UI adaptable OS that people want in the modern era. But then, you can't have that because people are always crying about legacy support. All right. Then I did put out a video on the Pixel Buds A-Series. Pixel Buds A-Series, your best buds. This one was a little different for me because, and we talked about this on the podcast, I'm not calling it a review, but I am trying to share some thoughts. This is still a feature highlight and some things that I hope can be addressed for how the Pixel Buds function, but I've done consulting work and hosting work for Google, so I feel not great calling the Pixel Buds A-Series a review with like a good purchasing recommendation. when I was hired to host an event for the Pixel Buds. But that also means, because I got to host that event, I got to speak with some of the product managers at Google. And there was some interesting insight. I know a lot of that stuff can be kind of dry and, oh yeah, this is really just you repeating what was on the spec sheet and what was in the press release. But there were a couple little nuggets, like why they're doing something specifically with how the Pixel Buds function. So I tried to incorporate as much as I could based on the agreements that I've signed. But the conversation is really more a bit experiential, not as reviewy as I would normally do, kind of an earbud video. Dave Burns, Juan has a moral compass telling us his bias beforehand. #sellout. Oh, McCorcoran3 is saying the Surface Duo is $409 brand new on Woot. That's really good for one of the most powerful Android tablets available on the internet today. If you would like to experience a folding Android tablet with LTE connectivity, and you don't want to step up to a Galaxy Tab, you want something that can fit in your pocket, I would feel real good about picking up a Surface Duo at $409. I don't feel bad having bought at launch at full price, because I flippin' love my Surface Duo. It's actually in a position of honor. I can't move. If you look in the background right there, being protected, because it's so fragile, being protected by all of my Hulkbuster armors. There's my Surface Duo, so I can just reach in, grab it, fire up a movie. It's kind of become my kitchen computer, which isn't great considering it's not as water resistant as it should be for a kitchen computer, but it's so handy for like keeping a recipe up and then also like watching a movie at the same time. Okay, getting back to housekeeping. This was a biggie for me. Sony Xperia 1 Mark III, finally a phone for me. A video where I broke down my experiences using the Xperia 1 Mark III. I'm not going to get too much into this because in the gadget block, we're going to talk about how every other reviewer says I'm wrong and this phone couldn't possibly be worth it, and you shouldn't want features on your premium phones, and how you should never buy anything other than a Samsung or an Apple. There's no other phone that can possibly be worth it at a comparable price to a Galaxy. And we just need to accept that the smartphone wars are over, everything's done, and we'll never need competition ever again, because Samsung and Apple will always do the right thing, and we'll never need pressure from another company to make sure that Samsung and Apple are iterating and improving their products. But I'm not bitter. Moving right along, I'm personally going through this with my family, so I decided to turn it into a video for reviews.org. We're shopping a new cell phone plan, and I'm pretty sure I know what I'm going to be leaning into, but I wanted to kind of spell out what our options were, given our area. So I'm not trying to write off any other carriers or MVNOs, but I did a sort of showdown between Mint, Visible, and US Mobile. And all three of these are just stunning competitors for getting good service, because they're on Verizon and T-Mobile networks, but then also for offering you huge buckets of data for the lowest possible prices. So that's the stark difference between where I was on Google Fi. Google Fi to me is still one of the best options for travel, but I haven't been doing that a whole lot lately. So this metered data, as everything is starting to open up again, I need more data. I mean, like, just trying out US Mobile. I used US Mobile Sims to test drive T-Mobile and Verizon here at the house. And like, even just trying out those Sims, immediately going to like, I can stream music with abandon. I can download so many files from my home NOS when I need to work remote. Just like, oh, the intoxicating effect of unlimited data. So I explained why AT&T really isn't in the running, but yeah, we had to open this up to reviews.org, and some of the comments are pretty good. And lastly, let me get this out of the way here. Lastly, A hilarious oversight on my part last week led to kind of an interesting intro for the best of our week. So if you want some of our initial Xperia impressions and some of the explanation of how we came to our Xperia videos, TK and I, that was obviously a major topic last Thursday. It's when the embargo lifted. It literally was Xperia launch day. Or I should say Western markets, Xperia launch embargo day. And so best of our week, episode 27, after dinner, my wife and I took Lex out for a little walk around the block, and there's a park not too far from our house. And so I'm just having a lovely evening. You can see it's already kind of getting past sunset. Lex is playing with some other kids at the park. It's really beautiful weather. It's finally cooling off in the evenings. And I get a text from TK, and he's like, "Hey, man, are you going to join us?" And I was like, "Oh, I am almost 2 miles away from my office. Give me a minute." Oh, snap. And so I figured it was going to take me too long to really walk back, and I didn't want to run it hard because I'm not in great shape. So I'd be like completely out of breath and just absolutely disgusting to be on camera. So on the walk, I fired up our StreamYard link. And the OnePlus 9 on T-Mobile did a reasonably good job. Oh, and also the TCL earbuds. So this is the TCL Move Audio S600s. $100 active noise cancellation, solid techie earbuds that I'm going to have a video out on soon. And so you can hear those in action as I'm walking down busy streets in my neighborhood. But we eventually got the show on track. So it was encouraging, though, where in my last place, where Gadget Lab 3 was housed, the cell connection was so bad I could barely go out on my back porch and get any kind of stream up. Walking a mile loop around my neighborhood here, I kept a pretty decent 720p connection. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. It is cell phone data, but I was very encouraged. I could go outside more frequently and do something. And so I'm hoping to do maybe even an episode of the podcast, like out on the road. Hey, we're going to go stream this somewhere. So that could be kind of fun. So I did not look at when we started. That was housekeeping. I feel like I did pretty good. Like, what did I hit? Like 10 minutes? 12 minutes? Somewhere like that? Anyone? Bueller? So much stuff. So much stuff went live. I'm in pre-pro for a lot of stuff. So I was really proud of this last week. But of course, all of the stories that were 14 days. Screw you, Dave Burns. I did good. I demand my kudos. Both the acknowledgement of a job well done and the candy bar granola bar from the late 80s. I want my back pats. You guys weren't even paying attention. I've got like 11 minutes. Maybe it was 14. You jerks. All right. All of the stories we're going to be talking about, all of the links, all of the housekeeping, and all of the news articles, everything's going to be available on this week's show notes, SomeGadgetGuy.com. All right, let's jump in. Let's get into this. We've been talking about antitrust investigations. We've been following up on the House committee just passed, or just moved through committee, the antitrust bill. So it's going to go to a vote in the House, then it'll have to go to the Senate. It's unlikely this is going to get passed, but excuse me, this is a step in the right direction for some kind of government reaction to mega data corporations. If it's Facebook, if it's Apple, Google, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Microsoft is probably in there somewhere too. So we just want to keep an eye on news surrounding some of these issues. How do we regulate huge tech and try to keep some sense of a fair playing field? You know, if Amazon is the store that another seller needs to use, but then Amazon can replicate that other business's model, and they have access to that business's proprietary customer information, to me, That is an anti-consumer trend that needs to be regulated for. If Amazon can't show that they are properly firewalling their divisions between each other, then I would say Amazon needs to be broken up. So the first step in that is actually pointing a regulatory agency towards these types of business practices. And Amazon is very concerned about this. So there's a new chair at the FTC. And I haven't actually been keeping up with the FTC as much as I've been watching the shenanigans at the FCC. So the Federal Trade Commission is, Amazon. Let's start this off the way I should. This article, written by Russell Brandom at The Verge. I'm way off my normal pattern. It's like I've never hosted this podcast before. Amazon is pushing back against Lina Khan, the newly confirmed chair of the Federal Trade Commission, by following a recusal motion against the longtime antitrust advocate, first reported by the Wall Street Journal. The petition asks Khan to restrict herself from any proceedings involving Amazon on the basis of her past statements about the company, including claims that Amazon is a monopoly and should be broken up. Quote, federal ethics rules require recusal when a new commissioner previously has expressed views that go beyond general policy commentary and has made statements about specific factual and legal issues relating to a particular company. Chair Khan has made numerous and highly detailed public pronouncements regarding Amazon, including on market definition, specific conduct, and theories of harm, and the purpose, effects, and legality of such conduct. Indeed, she has on numerous occasions argued that Amazon is guilty of antitrust violations and should be broken up, which is an interesting legal tact. It actually has some merit in terms of what the overall mission statement of a regulatory agency as the FTC should resemble. Again, it's Federal Trade Commission. It's supposed to protect consumers from corporate harm in some form based on the detailed relationship between the company and the consumer. So especially like a company puts out an end user license agreement or some kind of terms of service and you agree to that, you are engaging in a business relationship. Even just by buying a product and saying, yeah, I agree to all this, you are now in a legal contract with that manufacturer or that corporation. But the flip side of this is if Amazon can force the chairwoman of the FTC to recuse herself based on prior comments, it puts a giant lens on the practice of installing a chairman or a chairwoman to the FTC. It's tricky because you would want someone at the head of a regulatory agency to be someone very well versed on the legalities and the politics of what that commission is trying to regulate. So who do we find that has never talked about consumer harms or regulatory practices or mega corporations? Who is that person? If anyone can be forced to recuse themselves, I have my trays in. It is really hard for me to say recuse. If they have to recuse themselves from any company that they've ever made previous statements about with any intention of examining the regulatory practices of that business, then that person really wouldn't be qualified to head that commission. You know what I mean? So this is an extremely nuanced and fine line in the sand where we need to say, like, hey, if we want a regulator who's going to go in there and actually, examine these companies for anti-consumer business practices, we need someone who can do that. You know, it'd be like saying, well, Elizabeth Warren has said mean things about banks, so she shouldn't be allowed to write laws about banks. And I don't think that's how government should function. So, I feel like this is an important one to keep an eye on, because if Amazon gets their way here, then a potentially passionate advocate and watchdog for consumer interests might get muzzled just because Amazon thinks she's too mean. She said mean things about us. Oh no. From Kappa Cash, Amazon just proves that big corporations don't really care about consumers, only their bottom line. And I also have to, because there's that sentiment, right? Like, a corporation exists to extract as much value for shareholders as they possibly can. And I feel like moving into the 2020s, I think it's okay if we start pushing back against the notion that all corporations need to exhibit cancerous growth. I feel like the success of a corporation being hinged to unrealistic momentum in the stock market doesn't necessarily mean that that company is successful or a failure. And I think we need to push back against this unhinged craving for exponential growth in all profit sectors. And I think something like this kind of helps us color the conversation. You know, this is just the beginning of what's probably going to be yet another series of legal fights where Amazon is going to, you know, push back against the federal government, and our tax dollars are going to be spent trying to wrangle some notion of regulatory oversight over these types of business practices. So again, Amazon, in doing this, is also making the same play at, like, hey, this is going to eat up a lot of time, money, and resources from, you know, the FTC, which is already probably a somewhat underfunded commission in our federal government. So I don't think this is a great look for Amazon. Dave Burns, that sounds like communism. Comrade Juan strikes again, but I'm wearing my blue hat. Blue. I'm not wearing my red hat or that weird Kangol that I got that I get weird about wearing in public because it makes me look a little like Che Guevara, but, like, you know, it's got a big Kangol label on the side, so it's absolutely a capitalist fashion piece. Oh no. Socialist Democrat hat, blue. DTNO, blue is the new red. So anyway, short story, incredibly long. This is another one we should keep an eye on. How these legal proceedings go down and how they're influenced by the EU is going to be huge over the next 10 years. And we're seeing the first steps of that happening now. What's happening now is a conversation that's going to play out in our halls of government for the next decade. And technology is going to be accelerating even faster to try and find future loopholes that don't even exist yet. Speaking of legal wranglings that will take decades to play out in courts, I'm not going to spend too much on this because I really want you to read the article from Ars Technica written up by Tim Deschamps. Google and Microsoft agree to start suing each other again. The tech giants end 5 years of quietly settling their differences. This article has a great breakdown. It's real short. You don't have to worry about it. I mean, I could read it off right now, but I want to get to the gadget block efficiently this week. But from the opening, after years of relative calm, Google and Microsoft are tossing out their ceasefire, a move that, perhaps ironically, could bring each company additional antitrust scrutiny. This is both scary and hilarious. Now is absolutely the right time for mega data companies like Google and Microsoft to publicly say, hey, we're not gonna quietly go behind closed doors and sort out these business practices. We're gonna start taking them back public to courts again because it looks like collusion. As a podcast host, Juan Carlos Bagnell, I am not saying there has been collusion. What I'm saying, the optics look bad. And I get cease and desist letters from Google and Microsoft. Oh no! Hey, remember those Pixel Buds A series? Dave Burns, I'm sued for libel, guy. Now is the right time. If nothing else, if we're going to find what the new tech normal should resemble, it needs to be transparency. It needs to be, visible public proceedings and way more disclosure. way more accessibility for consumers. So it's just a funny headline, but at the same time, yeah, this is absolutely an issue with how mega corporations can do business with each other in ways that benefit themselves at the expense of competitors and in ways that don't benefit end users, people on the ground. Simon says Hypno Juan Castro Bagnell. From the Castro district? That place is hopping. And Mauricio, hola, from Mexico. All right, moving right along. Like I said, I just thought that was funny. We're going to be putting up a video on this, asking for your feedback on reviews.org, asking for your replies. There's a fun question that I want to put in place here, but just making new internet is expensive. And so for all of the headlines that Starlink has been getting, we're excited for more competition. I think Elon Musk is a polarizing caricature of an evil genius. But there's something like we're thirsty for it. If there's another option to get the internets, people are genuinely interested in having something that they can use as leverage. You say, hey, I don't want to pay these fees anymore, and I'm going to go with a competitor. But when we see headlines like this, it definitely throws into stark contrast. This stuff is expensive. Musk says may need. This is not a great headline from Reuters. Why don't I add a he? Musk says he may need $30 billion to keep Starlink in orbit. Billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk said on Tuesday that his Starlink satellite internet venture was growing quickly as he forecast total investment costs in the business at between $20 and $30 billion. So, like I said, there's going to be a video out on that for reviews.org, probably early afternoon Pacific time. I'd be curious to see your thoughts if you feel so inclined as to drop some comments on that video, because I think that there's also kind of a classic Elon Musk play with him so publicly disclosing what his next round of investment needs to be. So not so much do we think, or could it be Starlink is in trouble if they're needing that much cash based on their current number of subscribers, but could it also be an evil genius play from Elon Musk? Like, is he playing fourth dimensional chess here, not chest? I don't know that any of us need to see Elon Musk's chest. Paul Burry, 30 billion. Let me just look at my couch cushions. Again, I mean, the obvious joke is like, couldn't Elon just write a check for that? Like, he could do that, right? He should have 30 billion just lying around. So Dave Burns, this is what I mean. Like, it is not that I think that this is a scam. I mean, but I think, is this a play from Elon? Dave writes, is this going to be that thing where we pay him a bunch of money, but then they don't actually put the satellites up? Considering how aggressive their initial satellite constellation was, I don't think that's the concern, because this is also like paying Starlink paying SpaceX, right? So whatever money goes into Starlink as an investment is paid internally to SpaceX to get those satellites up in space. And then it looks good for SpaceX that they're running so many successful missions. Like, it's all just an almost perfect loop of positive feedback for Elon Musk brands. So I don't think that's the play, but I still think there's something interesting in the way that Elon is making this so public, has made so much noise about this. So again, reviews.org should be up this afternoon. I'm curious to see what y'all's thoughts are. And Paul Purry, I completely agree. More satellite thingies. I don't know that having multiple constellations of internet providing satellites is going to be a good thing. But if we're not going to get landline competition for internets, we've got to do something else. My vote is municipal fiber, but satellites might need to work too. From Geet Madden, I mean, I feel like most of us in the chat will agree. Don't we let billionaires go unchecked because they take risks and invest their own money for the good of society? Well, yeah, but the way that billionaires take risks with their own money. Elon isn't saying we're putting 30 billion in. He has his hand out for 30 billion additional investment. So he's now taking a $30 billion risk with other people's cash. So last story for the news block. We're cooking today. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling real good. This one I want to spend just a second longer on, rather, just outside the headline. Flashback. Before I was Some Gadget Guy, I was Some Audio Guy. And Some Audio Guy had a similar reputation as Some Gadget Guy for being kind of a snarky asshole. I would regularly review home recording equipment, high-end studio-grade kit, interfaces, microphones, different tips and tricks for wall treatments and sound reflective or reflection-absorbing sound materials. Like, I had a whole side business of consultation. You could hire me to go out to your place and try and set up a more professional recording space. I was doing microphone shootouts. One of my favorite clients, he asked me to bring like 5 different mics that he was thinking of buying. And he tried to put me on the spot. He was like, okay, well, I've recorded samples on all 5 of these mics. So what I'd like you to do is tell me which one that you like. And I'm going to do kind of a blind taste test. And you're like, oh, you want to see if I can really hear the differences. And not only did I nail every mic, but told him like, well, when you're reading this, you're inflecting like that. So you really want to maybe lean towards a 414. But if most of your reads are coming from this type of promo style, I know the 416 sounds louder, but the TLM 103 on your voice really cut through. And like, it was kind of great, sort of shutting them down. I like being right. Doesn't everybody like being right? Sorry, for me, that was a trip down memory lane. In that consultation business, one of my most recommended solutions for home recording was the program Audacity. Audacity is an ugly but phenomenally well-featured audio recording program. It's open source. It's public domain. You can get it for free. People can contribute to improvements and bug fixes. It wasn't radically developed on. It wasn't like a constantly evolving piece of software. But the recording capabilities, the editing capabilities, and genuinely one of the better noise reduction filters available on any recording platform, let alone any free software. Dave Burns, it looks like it's from 1998. It does. And in fact, like, as they've tried to polish up the UI to make it a little softer around the edges, I think it's made it look worse. I'd kind of like it better if it were old school Windows XP. Just like, don't even pretend. But anyway, I have turned so many people towards Audacity, and one of the main things that I absolutely adored, let's say, here's the big problem, is familiarity. I do not believe any software is intuitive. In fact, the more friendly and helpful you try to make a piece of software, the more I think it actually gets in your way and can be confusing or frustrating for consumers. The only thing that matters is, did you really take the time to get a feel for it? And that time is an investment. You think about what you would pay yourself if you were on the clock to learn a new piece of software, to learn a new workflow. So one of the killer functions of Audacity is, if you take the time to learn this free piece of software, that education should not be discounted. If you decide to switch computer platforms, Audacity works on Linux, Windows, and Mac OS. There's less concern on the future viability of that software platform because it will follow you no matter what computer you're using it from. Love it. I've loved Audacity my entire career. I mostly cut out of SoundForge, but it's pretty common that something will bork in SoundForge, and what do I turn to? I turn to Audacity. Almost never have I had some issue where I couldn't get something edited in Audacity. So, these headlines less good. Audacity sparks uproar over new data collection policy. Written up by Chris Holt on Engadget. Some users are calling the audio editing app spyware. All right, from the article, recent changes to the Audacity privacy policy have led to some users calling the audio editing app spyware. The open source software is now collecting user data for app analytics and improving our app, as well as for legal enforcement. Skipping a little further here, this policy says Muse Group will capture, quote, data necessary for law enforcement, litigation, and authority requests, if any. It may share personal data with, quote, any competent law enforcement body, regulatory, government agency, court, or other third-party buyer. Third-party, where we... Oh, sorry, not third-party buyers. Sorry. Let's take that again. Any competent law enforcement body, regulatory, government agency, court, or other third party where we believe disclosure is necessary, data may be shared with potential buyers too. I hate that so much because it's so broad and it's so open-ended. And so I'm not familiar with Muse Group. I don't use any of the software that's under their licensing umbrella. But basically, Audacity sort of changed hands from just the open community of people contributing to Audacity as a project. And now it's under the umbrella of Muse Group. But reading through some other Reddits and forum posts, apparently Muse Group has done similar things with other really popular little niche audio and recording apps. And I hate it because it's so broadly worded that, well, it's not likely that we'll sell off user data or that we'll have to give, a police officer access to all the information that we glean off of your computer. But legally, we have to be able to do that. And I don't think that's necessary. We're talking about an audio recording program. And what kind of use do you foresee that law enforcement agents would need access to data gleaned from an audio recording platform? And to me, it just sounds like really dumb. I mean, like, I'm trying to be a bit more eloquent, but I'm emotionally horrifically frustrated. And again, because I've been pointing people at this program for, over a decade. I think I wrote my first article on Audacity for SomeAudioGuy.com. Like 2004? I think it's been that long. Paul Purry, the audacity of the Audacity. Well, and people are saying Aditya is like, I need to use Audacity more. I can confidently admit that I'm not used to its full potential. So what I'm hoping is we see something rise up to kind of take its place as some other open source solution. Kind of like when GIMP was having its own internal conflict, and they don't like the name, and there were some other forks in some of the code for GIMP. I still have GIMP installed. Glimpse is the fork version of GIMP to make a better name. I'm hoping that something like that can arrive, even if it's not Audacity but a fork of it. If someone else decides like, hey, we can make an audio recording app, it's current year, recording audio isn't as technically challenging as it used to be. So it's gross. Gary the Fireman, yeah, legal sleaze. Absolutely. From Fat Produce, a highlighted comment: does it mean that if I edit a ringtone out of a copyrighted song in Audacity that I'll get a call from the police? I don't think it's that one-to-one, but conceivably, let's say you got busted for some kind of copyright infringement, and I guess if law enforcement seized your computer and saw that you were using Audacity, they could requisition Audacity's logs? And Tech Potato is saying it's all about copyright detection. And he uses Audacity daily. Dave Burns 1 is a dinosaur. And from Awesome Possum, this is largely correct. According to DMCA laws, ripping and recording copies of existing CDs, cassettes, or vinyls is a violation. Making, if I understand it correctly, and I am not a lawyer, so someone please correct me if I'm wrong here, making a copy of a piece of media for personal use with no distribution is technically not illegal. What's illegal is any attempt to circumvent established copy protection. So like you put a Blu-ray into your drive, you're technically allowed to make a copy of that Blu-ray. You're not legally allowed to try and circumvent the copy protection on that Blu-ray. So it's sort of a catch-22 as I understand current copyright law, which I could be completely incorrect, but that's my understanding of it. Get Legal on the phone. I wish Legal would like answer my phone calls. That dude is rad. I have such a nerd crush on Legal DJ. Oh, some tech potatoes from Dr. Ian. They've tried wording DMCA to also include making copies even when you don't distribute. So yes, there is an intention in the DMCA to absolutely find every legal exploit to prevent the unauthorized duplication of material. But as I understand it currently, you are allowed to make a backup if you have some way of legally incorporating or circumventing the copy protection. And if you have to break that, that's what's illegal. But again, I'm not a lawyer. Anyway, Audacity is breaking my heart. It makes me real sad. I'm not entirely sure what I would recommend. What's funny is this article popped up and I realized like I have not updated my Audacity in a really long time. So thankfully, the current installed copy of Audacity that I have on my workstation probably isn't incorporating these really dumb, this new end user licensing agreement with all of these potentially snooping, data snooping, legal permissions included. So if you decide to pick up Audacity, I'm sure there's going to be a healthy market of people putting or sharing older installers for Audacity. Yeah, Tech Potato Audacity recently updated to 3.0. I know I'm on 2. something, and it's not even one of the more current versions of Audacity 2. It's probably quite a bit older. Oh, from Doomer, there's already Audacium. Let's see if we can find that. Audacium. I've already failed at spelling Audacium. Let's try Audacium Audio, because Audacium first defaults to quickly increase your organizational agility. That's probably not. I see Audacious Audio, Audacious, an audio player. I'm gonna have to dig around, but I'm sure if someone is doing like a Chromium Audacity, we can try and dig it up. You know, that might make for kind of like a fun video. Simon says, "No, Audacity hurt him. Pull the plug." I do one Google search, and Spectrum kills my live stream. Come on. And we were just making it through the news block. Gormlord, must be my fault. My bad. I just joined. How lame. I hate it when I get those split files. It's such a pain. All right. So, anyway, that was fun. Why don't we go ahead and cap the news block there, and do a quick subreddit plug. And especially with Tech Potato in the chat, there's a great OnePlus story that we've got to dig into a little bit. But every podcast has a subreddit. My subreddit is no exception. My subreddit is designed to be a place where you can share content you feel deserves more attention. And so if you head over to reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles, you can see sort of a broader overview, some very content creators that aren't always pushed through the YouTube algorithm. I feel it's a better way to kind of get a sense of what tech topics are really being discussed. Once again, reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. And like I said, last week was pretty busy for me, and I had a pretty good week. And that also means top of the charts. All right. My Xperia 1 Mark III video took the top spot, and my Windows 11 video took the second spot. Wombatmail.disconnect parentheses semicolon. Oh no, Tech Potato just hacked my mainframes. So yes, I took the top 2 spots, but the number 3 comes from the Friday checkout. This is TechAlter's weekly Friday news block. Why Microsoft won't let you run Windows 11. Following out the top 5, we've got Josh Vergara, who was wrong about the Asus Zenfone 8. Wrong. I mean, that's not me saying it. That's his title. And then looking at Sony 365, checking out the Xperia 1 Mark III. Ignore the haters. First impressions and your questions answered. TK Bay in the number 6 spot, also looking at the gaming performance on the Xperia 1 Mark III. And Trent's Tech, checking out TCL, a care package from TCL. My Pixel Buds A series. And then rounding out the top 10, someone with 47,000 subscribers, A Day of Photography with the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III by Koki Yamaguchi. And this is a really pretty video. So again, someone who kind of understands better how cameras work seems to be getting wonderful content out of an Xperia 1 Mark III. That certainly is not foreshadowing any of the conversation we're going to have about the Xperia 1 Mark III and some of the other reviewers. And Erode Tech, this is their first time chatting, just saying, hey, Juan, and just joined the subreddit. Erode Tech has the right idea. Not only piping up to say hey for their very first chat here on Twitch, but joining the subreddit would mean the world to me, because I really do genuinely believe in this sort of spreading the wealth. And the reason why is because I personally get so much more entertainment value out of this broader tech landscape. And when I go to YouTube and everything kind of funnels into a handful of channels with millions of subscribers, and when I tell YouTube I want to subscribe to up-and-coming content creators and I want to subscribe to smaller, established channels, they immediately try to push me to someone with like 5 million subs. Their next recommendation is, oh, if you like tech, you must like this guy. And I'm trying everything I can to show YouTube that is not the content I'm engaging with, and I'm trying to find these other conversations. So instead, we kind of just took it to Reddit. Reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. We're getting to proper 2,000 members. We are now rounded up to 1.9 thousand followers on the subreddit, but we're getting incredible contributions. And we just added El Jefe as a moderator, trying to help us keep up with some of the content. A few people have been getting brigaded on, where the automod and reports of spam have actually been trying to take out some channels, which is shocking. So yeah, we're starting to get a little tension. It's kind of fun. It is. It's really good times. So, Rotec, like I was like, damn, already got kicked out. See, you say one nice thing and then you just get bounced. And from Coppa Cash, pizza party when you hit that 2,000 mark. I mean, I can't buy you pizza, but maybe we do. We hang out and we eat some pizza together on the subreddit. All right. Last plug, reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. Now we're properly into the gadget block, and I'm still ahead of schedule here. So we're gonna run with this until OBS decides to crash on me again. I've been delaying the OBS update. Maybe this is OBS saying like, no, bro, you've got to update our stupid software. And now maybe that's what's tanking it. I don't know. I wanted to kick off with this story because it's just really frustrating how this cycle happens time and time again. And there is kind of a corollary to some of my previous conversations on things like net neutrality, where if a carrier or an ISP has too much control over the apps and services that they allow you to use on a network, that can have a chilling effect on competition. And we saw this happen with Google Wallet, and now we're seeing it happen again with RCS. So after following T-Mobile's footsteps, AT&T is announcing that all Android phones on AT&T will use Google Messages app and RCS, which is good. This is the right step. This is where we should have been 2 years ago, talking about any type of communication, telecommunication, messaging. Because I mean, the common refrain is, Android messaging is a mess, and why would you ever suffer that? There's iMessage, and that's always brilliant and perfect. And look, Google can't even get this right. But one of the major problems is, as a new texting protocol arrived, Google had a flavor of it that they were trying to push, and all of the carriers have gotten in the way, and they were going to have their own like proprietary implementations of ours. I'm grossly oversimplifying, by the way. It is way more complicated than what I'm describing. It's not like Google is one person and AT&T is another person, and AT&T's like, nah, bro. But that's kind of the summation. RCS is gonna be solid, but you've got to get everyone kind of speaking the same language. And so the carriers fought it and fought it and fought it. And all that time, it just reinforces and entrenches Apple's sort of messaging on ecosystem and locking people into iOS and iMessage. And this was the same thing. Like we saw the carriers fighting Google Wallet for mobile phone payment apps. And eventually they just gave up because, it's really hard. And so, we'll let Google just take it and run with it. But all that time, Apple Pay was left completely unfettered. And so the same thing is happening here. Ultimately, this is great. I'm really happy that now Google Messages is finally getting sort of the proper push that it should be, since the carrier implementations of this likely would have been awful. But again, this is a step in the right direction. Google Messages has been working really well for me. The chat features have been working really well for me. I genuinely prefer duo video calling over FaceTime. It's the narrative on this is finally changing. It's finally morphing and evolving into something a little less awful for Android users from where we were back in like the Hangouts era of Android. So I'm happy to see that. And hey, Jeff, your ears must have been burning as my stream keeps crashing. We were just mentioning you and how you're one of our new moderators on Glowing Rectangles. Everyone needs to be following El Jefe Reviews, especially if you like your ears. If you hate your ears and you don't like listening to good audio, then don't follow Jeff. Do not subscribe to his content, because if you hate your ears, you will absolutely not like what he has to say about awesome headphones. So, Dustadore saying Messages has been awesome for me too. It's nice. It's nice finally catching up. Jeff is saying I've been doing my best to clean up the mod section, which is true, because I am definitely not the most attentive moderator on Glowing Rectangles. Yes, accurate. So yes, moving right along. If you're on AT&T, enjoy finally getting the RCS support you should have had 2 years ago. I wanted to start with this because it's going to lead us into the conversation. And Tech Potato is in the chat right now. I just saw him make another comment. So first up, I want to give OnePlus some kudos. because I feel like a move like this, publicly announced, publicly discussed, is a good move, and we should be encouraging this from more manufacturers. I am, of course, referring to the OnePlus commits to 3 years of Android OS upgrades for flagship devices. This is coming by way of Phone Arena and Josh Swingle, but a lot of outlets have been writing this up. There is now a new update strategy for OnePlus phones. Flagships, starting with the OnePlus 8, will get 3 Android OS upgrades and 4 years of security updates. OnePlus Nord is going to be getting 2 OS upgrades and 3 years of security updates. And the N series, this is the critical one. I'm really excited about this more than any of the others. 1 Android OS upgrade, 3 years of security updates. I am so stoked by that. My general commentary on phones like the N10. Love the hardware. And again, this is kind of where I was in some of my commentary on like TCL phones, some of the lower, less expensive Motorola's. What hardware you can get for around $300 is astoundingly good. I mean, it's really good. The Nord N10 is such a screamer, feature-packed daily driver phone. It's a joy. It really is a joy. But when we were kind of thinking like, hey, this phone is going to be off the reservation after a year, that's less good. Again, someone might want to buy a phone and have some expectation that there's going to be support for that device for the length of time that they might use it. And right now, consumers are aggressively pushing beyond 2 years of averaging above 2 years of ownership on a phone. So this is proper good. I'm very excited by this. The flagship commentary is also helpful too. It's a little nuanced. I have concerns that when we get into operating system update 3, whatever that operating system is optimized for, we've got to be extremely critical about how that software, how that environment is applied to 3-year-old hardware. And it's why I'm a little anxious about, like Samsung's commitment, 4 years of operating, 4 major operating system updates. That's great. But if that 4th update isn't phenomenally well polished, then anyone who jumps on that update is going to have a phone that performs worse. Well, wouldn't you know it, your phone's 4 years old. Maybe it's just time to get a new one, where that phone would have been just as functional on the 3rd OS update and better security support. And this is the unknown, right? Like I'm making this speculation. I'm not saying that this is what Samsung is going to do, but Samsung has likely been responsible for battery throttling like Apple has. We know that there's a push to try and drive a consumer reaction, that there's planned obsolescence, that there are these upgrade cycles. We want people to move more aggressively, but at the same time, rationally, we also know that this is an unsustainable business model and we're swimming in mountains of e-waste. So anything that helps us keep these devices rolling longer is definitely going to get a thumbs up in my book. More features are going to be applied through Google Play services. So as Android evolves, it's not necessarily dependent on an OTA that will get new features. Like Nearby Share went all the way back to Android 6 and came as part of an Android Play services update. So we're good there. I'm a little less concerned about whether or not I'm getting all of the flashy new UI or maybe some of the other, under the hood optimizations if the software is well supported for 3 years and we know that the major exploits are going to be patched relatively well over that period of time. So, very happy about this. Obviously, this comes as part of the more direct intermingling of Oppo and OnePlus. It's been silly for a while to keep pretending that they were these distinctly different companies, and At some point, you just merge, like departments that are responsible for software. And if that overhead helps us better represent or better support these phones, then I'm not too bothered by it. I think it'll be kind of interesting if the Oppo label, especially with phones like the Find X, represents more of the kind of crazy experiment wing of Oppo, and the OnePlus label is a little bit more straightforward, right? A OnePlus 9 versus a Find X3, there are so many similarities, where even like TK Bay, I think, was like installing a screen protector for his OnePlus 9, and it was the exact same fit for the Find X3. We understand that they've already been kind of, using similar parts bins and drawing inspiration from each other. But it would be kind of interesting where like microscope mode kind of novelty goes to the Find, and more straightforward performance is the banner under which OnePlus operates. Check potato until they get put on the entity list. Well, I mean, if OnePlus does someone please tell me? I've always meant to look this up, and I don't know that they do, but OnePlus doesn't have a heavy stake in telecommunications infrastructure, right? Like, they're not selling much networking equipment. It's more consumer electronics, right? Because, like, Xiaomi just won their challenge, in the U.S. courts that they shouldn't be on that list. I feel like Oppo could probably make a similar play. But the reason why I wanted to start with that kind of positive story, then critical story, is exactly the commentary on performance. OnePlus had built itself as an enthusiast brand, and then it betrayed enthusiasts everywhere. OnePlus literally drove to every enthusiast's house and kicked their puppy. That's what happened. If you watch all the reviews and how OnePlus can't make good phones anymore, that is true. That is absolutely accurate, and no one should ever buy them because they're just hot garbage now. But all of my snarky joking notwithstanding, that enthusiast label was in part won because of a very specific flavor of performance that came from those early OnePluses. They were they were wallet-friendly options that could compete with higher horsepower solutions. And so over time, when OnePlus made a pivot to be kind of more of a mainstream brand, they lost that small, nimble enthusiast flair, and now they're just competitive options against Galaxies and iPhones. I kind of missed the sarcasm there. Whoops. So this one was dropped on my lap. I was scrambling before the stream went live to kind of read up on their findings, but Dr. Ian sent this my way. OnePlus in the past has had some issues with accurately depicting the performance of their phones. Was it the OnePlus 5 or the OnePlus 6 where they were most recently caught juicing benchmarks again? I did like a whole interview on it for Cheddar, that like hip news broadcasting service that you'll sometimes see playing on gas station pumps here in the United States. They called me up and like, hey, you got to talk about this OnePlus scandal. And it's like 4 a.m. my time to hit the New York signal. That was not fun. But I seem to think, and someone please correct me, I believe it was the OnePlus 6 that was the last OnePlus we caught, where there was a specific instruction in the phone's OS that would activate a higher tier of performance for certain whitelisted apps, namely benchmarks. So if you ran a benchmark, the phone would crank and deliver a higher score, but if you were using any other app, you didn't have access to that performance profile. Simon Says Hypno says it was a OnePlus 5 and 6. So, sorry, there are a bunch of comments going on in here. And my snarkiness, again, notwithstanding my snarkiness, there's a lot to be snarky about on both sides. So when this article crops up, this is a really unique twist on the is OnePlus misrepresenting the performance of their phones? And it's hilarious because it's kind of the opposite situation of what we had with benchmark juicing, in a way. So this was written up by Andre, I can't pronounce his last name. I know he's like Andre F on Twitter, examining OnePlus's performance, behavior, optimization, or misrepresentation. And so Andre has gone through a number of benchmarks in this article, and apparently there is now a OnePlus blacklist where, depending on what app you use, if it's a more popular app, there is actually a throttled CPU condition for OnePlus phones, where it seems to deactivate the X1 performance core, and sometimes will even drop you to the low power cores, depending on the app or service that you're trying to use, and you are not getting the full performance of the phone. And so this is such a crazy commentary on where we were with benchmark juicing. And it kind of complements the broader conversation we've been having about the Snapdragon 888. So part of the hypothesis from Antitrust is that they're doing this for battery life. And that is applicable. The main comparison point that Andre brings up is the Galaxy S21 Ultra. And they're saying, like, well, through our sort of estimations of this performance and this profile, this web browsing test that we run, the S21 Ultra can go for almost 14 hours, and the OnePlus 9 Pro can go for almost 12. So if we just compare the phone spec for spec, there's almost a 12% difference in battery capacity. The S21 Ultra has a bigger battery. But on top of that, that performance battery life disparity kind of racks up to something around 18%. So we can't say it's all just the battery capacity, why the S21 Ultra can outperform the OnePlus 9 to this degree. And this all gets really messy too, because obviously most of the world has an Exynos, which isn't directly comparable. If you're comparing the S21 Ultra Qualcomm edition against the OnePlus 9 Pro, you also have to factor into account the enhanced mode battery optimizations for the S21 Ultra, where it is a CPU throttled lower performance mode to improve thermals, consistent performance, and battery life. And again, I've had people on Twitter like, well, I mean, it's just a scheduler. You know, what Samsung's doing is just a scheduler. And you're like, it is so easy to show real world CPU performance differences between enhanced mode on a Samsung and deactivated. And so it just seems like every single phone that is using a Snapdragon 888 is doing something to offload performance or reduce or restrict performance. And this chip can advertise the big numbers, but the real world performance needs to be restricted or constrained in some way. So like when we talk about, you know, the new performance core and the new GPU, I think Xiaomi kind of lets the phone run a lot hotter. But even on MIUI 12.5, they've done something to the CPU. When I got the Mi 11i, my CPU-bound Geekbench scores dropped roughly 10, maybe a little bit more than 10% after getting this update. So Xiaomi pulling back some of the performance of the 888. So Tech Potato, this is totally fair. Just to clarify, there is a difference between a hard throttle limit and a scheduler that favors higher battery life. This is totally true. But enhanced mode on a Samsung can restrict performance to the tune of dropping real-world apps down to Snapdragon 855 territory. So if I do a video render, if I do an audio mix down, if I batch process some photos, that scheduler is doing something profound to the performance of that phone that kicks it back 2 SoC generations. This isn't a synthetic benchmark. This is literally timing real apps you would want to use. So for it to come out of the box with ostensibly Snapdragon 855 performance, that is a pretty big hit. The scheduler is doing something significant. It's not down to 865 territory. And in fact, like an 865 Plus is able to catch up to the 865 Plus in the Note 20 Ultra is able to hang with most of the performance of the Snapdragon 888 phones. So we're overlapping in very interesting ways when you're trying to time beyond extended run sequences of web consumption or synthetic benchmarks that quickly populate very tiny small tests. You really sit a phone down and use it for sustaining in one app, rendering a video. The performance profile is significantly altered when you toggle that enhanced mode. So the ultimate point on this, though, why this is kind of a worse look for OnePlus is at least Samsung is acknowledging that the performance of this SoC can be inconsistent when taking into account thermals, and they're including a toggle. They believe that out of the box, you probably don't need all that horsepower, or at least most of their customers aren't even going to notice that horsepower disparity. But for someone who might, who is trying to extract all of the work out of this SoC that they can, they have enhanced mode, and you can toggle it, and your battery life will drain significantly faster, but it does do something interesting to CPU bound tasks. Xiaomi, like I just said, recently throttled down CPU benchmarks. The phone does not score as high. What's a rough look for OnePlus is, in addition to the GPU limiter that we see on a bunch of games, there appears to be a performance blacklist. And they're common apps like Chrome, Firefox, they're on this performance blacklist. The editors at Antec had to go to Vivaldi browser to circumvent, because that wasn't on the blacklist, and you could see performance that was more in keeping with other Snapdragon 888 phones when they ran some of their web browser benchmarks. So it's kind of incredible what Qualcomm has achieved in delivering the Snapdragon 888. Really starts to feel a bit more like the template or the roadmap for some future iteration of a laptop or maybe a high-end tablet chip. Like what I see from the Snapdragon 888 looks like it would be incredible if it had active cooling. And not just like smartphone tiny little fans active cooling, like if you could really put a heat sink in a fan, some copper pipes on that thing, and I think we'd be rocking and rolling, and we'd really be able to drive that chip to its limit. I think we're facing some significant power issues, power draw issues, and thermal issues that can't be properly mitigated when we're cramming all of this into a phone. And this likely is contributing. I mean, like what OnePlus is doing for the camera app is kind of incredible. Extended dynamic range and HDR processing for 4K video at up to 120 frames per second, or 8K video at 30 frames per second. While there's an active 5G data connection, the battery is draining faster, which means it's running hotter, and the screen is cranking to its maximum brightness. And it's not terribly surprising that you get a couple minutes of video recording in nice springtime weather before that phone starts to spit out some warnings. Now we see this, and there is a performance blacklist that is not consumer accessible, and that's kind of a bummer. The sort of bird's eye view of this conversation is how critical the nuance is in discussing the Snapdragon 888. I'm increasingly not liking OnePlus's solution. I can understand why they are making some of the performance limiting decisions that they are, but I would prefer I would prefer the disclosure or the clarity. I'm already critical of Samsung because Samsung doesn't really highlight that your phone comes out of the box in any way performance throttled. What OnePlus is doing is even worse because the consumer, the knowledgeable consumer who might dig for those settings has no recourse. If you want to evade the GPU limiter, it takes some ADB commands. And as far as I know, there isn't yet a way to do that with the CPU blacklist. So that's a step worse. What I think Samsung is doing is kind of scummy. What OnePlus is doing is a little scummier. So that's frustrating. Oh, and actually, that's a great point from Dr. Ian. Tech Potato. OnePlus could have purchased the worst S888 voltage and frequency bins. So they could be using sort of like the lowest performing tier to save a little cash. Again, like not every SoC, not every CPU is the same, is of the same performance. And if they can strike out a deal with Qualcomm to save a little bit of money per unit, that makes sense for why they would maybe need to institute some harder performance caps, thermal warnings at a sooner, arriving sooner than what we would see on an S21. That actually makes a lot of sense. But again, it definitely plays into an overall conversation where if you were on a Note 20 last year, your phone is still likely outperforming a lot of newer flagships. If you were on any Snapdragon 865, you're hanging really close. And in a handful of applications, if your manufacturer is doing any kind of performance throttling, Snapdragon 855s are still hanging in there and mixing it up near some of the top of the charts. Like, for all of the hand-wringing and nerd whining about the Snapdragon 855 and the Surface Duo, doing a video transcode is faster on the Duo than any 888 I've tested this year. So a DTNL is saying, so Apple is the bestest. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think we would all agree that in terms of CPU arc and overall performance, the A-series chipsets have been a good generation ahead of what Qualcomm has been putting out. But also this power race, which is what I don't understand. Even the A14... Wait a minute. I've got my A-series processors and my iPhones modeled up. Let's put it this way. iPhone 11s typically can sustain better frame rates at longer play times than iPhone 12s. So even Apple is running into some of this performance overhead where sustained performance and thermal throttling can impact performance, and it can end up worse than the product from a generation before. But I don't believe I've seen anything to suggest that iPhone 12s are running into any type of hard CPU limit. Instead, we've seen some shenanigans with Apple and benchmarks and real world performance, but nothing to the tune, definitely not nearly as varied as what we've seen in Android land. Because every manufacturer, like I said, every manufacturer has come up with a different strategy to address what they think consumers are going to care about for performance. And it's concerning. I don't believe that this is Snapdragon 810 levels of concerning, where quite a few phones with the 810 started facing component failure. Like, I don't think we're there, but it's not great. It sucks a lot of the fun out of new phone, new tier performance, new gadgets, when that sort of shadow of doubt is floating in the background. Like, am I really getting what I paid for? Is this really an upgrade over my 2-year-old phone? Maybe not. Vasicos 8, but bar graphs must be bigger, Juan. Bar graphs must be bigger. Sorry, I'm catching up with the chat here because I was offline for 2 whole minutes, and I saw the person who was making a crack that if I were streaming this on a Chromebook, that I would have rebooted faster than that. So yes, my Threadripper, not the fastest boot times. But yeah, I definitely think it speaks to some focus that needs to be examined. Because I know in my circles of family and friends, if I tell them like, oh, this phone is so much more powerful, they're not only not going to care, well, they probably will care, but they'll probably be annoyed. Like, they don't need a more powerful phone to handle their email, browse social media, take some snapshots, point and shoot snapshotty photos or selfies, watch or stream audio and video. But if I went to them and said like, hey, this other phone is going to like double your battery life, you're going to get twice as much use per charge, I think they'd be phenomenally more excited by that. And I feel like as soon as we hit like Snapdragon 765s, we're overpowered. We're overkill for horsepower. We do need software optimization. I think we definitely need better optimization for mid-ranger phones, but we're OP. You can edit 4K video on 765s. The LG Wing was shooting 4K 60 at a stupid high bit rate on a 765. Like, we're good for horsepower, but if you pair that with a really big battery and you've got better advanced power management modes, or maybe even some corollaries like Sony's battery health style slow charging, like the runtime you can get out of those is just phenomenal. Like, look at a Pixel 5 runtime on a tiny little pocketable phone. That thing is such a mighty mouse. For battery life. Tex Potato, powerful phone to most people means opening apps in 150 milliseconds rather than 250 milliseconds. And again, I come from a family of engineers and scientists and teachers, and they don't care. Like, those are people who actually might care. They don't care. So I feel like that's the right place to transition. When I rebooted, I don't want to fire up my browser because it's going to load like 50 tabs. And apparently Spectrum can't handle a low quality 1080p upstream. So why don't we switch gears, wrap up this show? I had one other article and now I can't even remember what it was. But I kind of feel like now's the right time to circle back, kind of share some of my impressions and thoughts on the Xperia 1 Mark III, and then also like how and why so much. Oh, you know what? I actually might still need to pull up my browser. Dang it. All right, folks, we're going to do it now because if this borks the stream, I can recover one more time for the last 20 minutes of this stream. All right, here we go. I just clicked on Firefox. It's even pulling up the Twitch chat. What's going to happen? My stream quality went up. I hate Spectrum so much. Okay. So, Xperia 1 Mark III. I feel, especially in this collection of individuals, people in the live chat here, and if you're catching the replay on this, I don't even know how I'm going to get a replay of this out with so many video clips. First of all, I'd kind of be curious just to get sort of a lay of the land here, with everyone in the live chat here, and for the people that have regularly joined these kinds of conversations. What's the first sentence that kind of comes to mind? You see Xperia 1 Mark III. What's the feel? Because I feel this is a super premium product. It's an expensive, high price tag device, and Fat Produce, intense Battlestar Galactica drums. Volume increases as you open your browser. Lots of shaky cam and like punch zooms from like Duplass Brothers films. What are you feeling? I'd love to get some comments and read some of those comments here before I even start speaking. And not like what other reviewers have said. Like literally, it's like a Rorschach test. Like, you see Xperia 1 Mark III and you think Tech Potato is saying expensive as hell. Simon Says Hypno does everything well. I don't know if you intended to rhyme, but that was sublime. Aditya Anil is saying, holy F, I want one. Awesome Possum first. Ahiago, is that how you pronounce it? Ahiago emojis, but then sadness on the price. Jonah is saying Xperia equals unique. Dave Burns is saying I want one. Dustadore, a phone I'd love to have but don't have the money for. King Turtle, first sentence that comes to my mind, expensive pro camera phone. Kappa Cash is saying true flagship. Simon is doubling it up, no features left out. Now, Tech Potato, if you can rhyme against no features left out, I would maybe go price makes me pout. Yeah? Feeling that? We're going to get Dr. Susie up in this biz. Let's see. McCorcoran, I can't look the Xperia without also thinking about my critique of the YouTube media and the lack of competition in the Android space. Loki Ted, 4K 120 hertz display. Heiki, stunning camera performance in knowledgeable hands. Again, this is a phone that I absolutely want to get into some of the hands of the folks on the Discord. Let's see. Where was I? Doomer, my next phone after 3 years from my S20 FE is going to be a Sony. Gormlord, waiting for the 5 Mark III. F Mooney, I expect to hear it is so niche that no one should buy. I know it's sleek and unique. Vazikos, no notch. I was expecting that from Vazikos. McCorcoran, I'm excited that a company is at least not always predictable. Simon says Hypno, my wallet equals sad. And anybody want a peanut? I'm going to keep rhyming Simon Says Hypno and Tech Potato. This is a fun game for me. I really enjoy that. Nick Fell, LG, but with software polish. Okay. So I feel those are the right feelings. I guess there's a part of me that is still frustrated, and I don't completely understand a media commentary on a device that is working, in my opinion, is working pretty aggressively at targeting a very specific consumer demographic. It's a very niche demographic. And I feel when you hinge a review on a product like that under the guise of average consumers, you're doing a significant disservice to the product, and you're not really reviewing it for what it is. I mean, you're reviewing it for what it's not. It's not an iPhone. It must not be worth it. Or you praise all of these amazing things that Sony has done, and then you wrap your video saying, "Oh, you should just buy a Samsung." And this is what's so critically frustrating to me is there is a much, much smaller community of people out there that are going to vibe with what the Sony does well. Obviously, some of my ire is coming from the interaction I had with the Xperia 5 Mark II last year and into the beginning of this year, where I feel reviewers were more reading down a spec sheet, not really using the product, not doing any investigation on Sony's business strategy, and coming to conclusions about whether or not people should buy the phone, or even if Sony should keep making phones. Obviously, I'm referencing that editorial I wrote, kind of picking apart someone's video on the Xperia 5 Mark II. So when you go to my video, and obviously I've got my little snarky skits in the middle of the video, and I'm taking pot shots at reviewers, I really do need people to understand that I had the phone under embargo. The script you're watching me perform was written the beginning of June. I wrote that script before most of the big YouTubers even had their hands on the phone. So that is not a reply to any one specific reviewer. Those were my guesses as to how the phone would be received by reviewers who definitely financially benefit from saying nice things about Samsung and Apple for a majority of their commentary. Like, I didn't watch a reviewer's video and then make a rebuttal. I had that script written before they had their hands on the phone. That's how predictable I think those criticisms of Sony products are. I could play the same game with LG, and we even saw it. Like after the Xperia 1 III was announced, there was a whole flurry of like tweets from reviewers saying like, I don't even need to change my script from the Xperia 1 Mark II. I could just republish the exact same review. But what's frustrating is just how often they get things demonstrably wrong. Like I've got a bunch of people in my comments on my video saying like, well, so-and-so said you can't use the Sony headphone jack for a microphone in. And you're like, you absolutely can. They're just so unfamiliar with plugging in headphones, I guess, that they didn't check what kind of cable they were using to plug into the Sony. I don't blame them. If you've been with Samsung and Apple for these last couple of years, you're probably not used to having a headphone jack on such an expensive phone. Waka waka. But it goes down into more insidious, into more sort of ignorantly insidious pathways, like saying, well, an Xperia is so hard to use. Who can fiddle with manual controls for every photo that they take? And you're like, no, there's a really good auto mode. But Sony photos are so washed out. Well, they're only washed out if you have set your standard at Samsung oversaturation, right? So I would say Sony photos are definitely the flattest, but we also know that consumers really do love to edit. Don't pretend that consumers don't take a ton of photos and then edit their photos before sharing them on social media. At the lowest level, that's why we have tons of filters on every single social media platform. When you say things like, oh, Sony doesn't have HDR, they absolutely do. But what Sony is doing with their HDR profiles, especially for video, is kind of like what LG was doing, where it's a flat grade. The idea is that you would edit that video. It's kind of like when LG used to offer log. It's just, you have to use the phone to know that it's there. Or HDR in photos. There is an HDR processing on those photos. And you're like, oh, their photos are so soft. And you're like, no, you're used to looking at crazy over sharpened photos. I mean, again, it's kind of like why I like OnePlus processing, is because it's crispy and edgy and over contrasty. that's a photo style I kind of like better than Samsung's over sharpened vibrance mode. Paul Purry, it's definitely time. It's well past time for Juan to use some colorful metaphors in regards to the stream quality. Time and time again, you actually get to the description of the feature and they've got it wrong. You can't tap to focus in the Sony Cinema Pro app, and you're like, that's mad. You totally can. Tap to focus is automatically enabled. What again, you're now beyond just, I have an opinion, and my opinion is for $1,000, most people should buy a Samsung. You are actively misrepresenting what the Sony is capable of, disregarding the Sony's benefits, because there are benefits of using a Sony over some of these other products, and then dismissing some of the areas where they're groundbreaking in technology, like battery health, and then wrapping it all up with not even getting the data right. So when you crouch that in average consumer commentary and turning enthusiast into some kind of pejorative, oh, enthusiasts might like this, but you don't want to be one of those nerds. You want to be on the winning team with the most players, with all the average consumers. And like, that's not it. Actively you're trying to dismantle what makes a Sony unique and saying you don't want competition. Like, you don't want different features and a different aesthetic or any different solution. So I just don't understand. I don't understand what it is that techies are trying to accomplish anymore outside of satisfying metrics on the YouTube algorithm for the broadest base of viewers. I think it's horrific to conflate owning a $1,200 Samsung or a $1,300 iPhone with average consumers. And it's absolutely why average consumers stopped listening to techies. They walked away from this space because average consumers are out there buying average phones. Average consumers are smart enough to spend their money on Galaxy A series over Galaxy S series, and they do still enjoy things like headphone jacks and memory card support. They're not used tremendously, but you did buy more phone for your needs going at the $400 to $500 tier than you do at the $1,000 tier. Time and time again, the phones that save companies like Apple and Samsung are phones like the iPhone SE and Galaxy A50. Apple's top of the charts regularly in the top 10 list of iPhones sold are iPhones that are 2 years old. They're not usually the iPhone Pros. So anytime I see someone with millions of subscribers talking up, well, I mean, what average consumer is going to pick up a Sony and just know that if you hold down the shutter button, you can take photos? That's just so hard. And who can fiddle with manual modes when there's this perfectly awesome auto mode green box? Like, I'm going to sit there and do my ISO and shutter speed for every single photo I take. Who has time for all that? It's all BS. Because their entire premise is completely flawed. Average consumers overwhelmingly are not shopping S21 Ultras. They're not blowing up the sales figures on iPhone 12 Pro Max. That's not where they're at. So why are we protecting the average consumers from this difficult, obtuse Sony Xperia? Anyone who's shopping a Sony Xperia is doing it with purpose. Like, no one is accidentally dropping $1,300 on a Sony. Oops! I just needed something to watch my Snapchat on, and I accidentally got this Sony, and it's the worst. That has never happened. No one has walked into the B&H warehouse, tripped and fallen and thrown $1,300 at a sales associate and stumbled out the door with an Xperia. That's not a thing that's ever befallen any consumer in the history of smartphone sales. Someone who is shopping a Sony is doing it with purpose. And the reason why I also know that, especially for the more Western reviewers that are trying to find ways to convince you to buy a Sam Apple, is the phone has already been out for a while. I got caught up in a reviewer embargo that lasted well over a month. I had the phone in May. And I couldn't talk about it until last week. So I was watching all of the commentary coming from the early sales in China, how aggressively this phone is selling out because they're being made in smaller batches. So they sell out crazy fast. Sony's financials have never been healthier for the mobile division, and they're making more money on a lower number of sold phones. Outside of the Western reviewers, this commentary has been significantly more positive. There are definitely pros and cons. I'm going to be digging more into camera performance. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about some of Sony's software tricks. I hope we see some refinement to their battery modes, their power saver, battery health, and HS power control profiles definitely need to be adjusted. But this is it. This is our last gasp. If you're considering a workhorse device at the top of the premium charts, and you still care about having easily upgradable storage, of having better thermal and power management controls, or the ability to plug in a headphone jack, both for headphones and for microphones, because the headphone jack absolutely works as an audio input, then the Sony is it. That is the last solution that ticks all those boxes. And better still, it brings some interesting perks. Whether or not you feel like you're going to benefit from them, or if you think that they're worth it, you can't deny that a 4K display at 120 hertz is a radical display to put on a phone. That is not cheap. That is a premium tier device, premium tier feature put on a premium price tag device. So, oh yeah, Anas Malas, Michael Fisher made me think he confirmed no analog in. He plugged in the wrong cable. I mean, it's that simple. It's a little finicky. Like, if you're looking to plug a microphone into a phone, you need to know your cable types. But you go to TK Bay's channel, and he has a short where he shows you how to use USB-C and a 3.5 millimeter input, and the phone detects it exactly the way that it should. Exactly the same as it was on the Xperia 1 Mark II. And again, I feel like a comment like that was likely targeted at people like me who have been advocating for headphone jacks because they are functional in both directions. They're functional for input and they're functional for output. And I think Michael Fisher tried one cable solution and it didn't immediately work. So he shrugged and decided that that's what was going in his review. TK Bay, by contrast, tested and then compared against previous findings, like how we used the Xperia 1 Mark II. Why would it be different on the Xperia 1 Mark III? My reactions to many of these Xperia reviews, less anger than when I wrote up my editorial on the Xperia 5 Mark II, specifically picking apart one reviewer, but very similar. You're not doing the work. You're not really investing in using the phone. You've more likely made up your mind on what the conversation was going to be before you really even had the device in hand. And I kind of know how long they had those phones because I'm pretty sure the phone I used under embargo went to one of these other bigger reviewers. So I know what their timetable was. And I know how they likely had the phone even longer than I did. And yet they're getting so much wrong. So I feel like we're at that point. If you just want to make content promoting Samsung and Apple, just do that. I have huge respect for guys like Rene Ritchie. Just be honest. If your shtick is, I'm an objective cell phone reviewer, but the only phones worth recommending are Sam Apple, then no, you've ceased objectivity. You're not objective. If you're trying to find who's a good fit for a phone and what the phone does well, and you're accurately depicting what the phone can do, then I think you're at least being fair. When you go out of your way to make a purchasing recommendation like just buy a Galaxy instead, I feel you are a convenient marketing addition for a company like Samsung, and that you're not earnestly educating or informing consumers. You're not really doing the job that you're claiming to do. And that's what I find disappointing. You want to be a storyteller, or you just want to lean into whatever's the most popular. You just want to make the most money on every video you can. Just pull the plug. Just go tell your audience, I focus on Samsung. I focus on Apple. That's what we do. Occasionally I'll play with another phone, but you know it's from the perspective of someone who's ultimately going to recommend Samsung. And it works. That works great, especially for Apple reviewers. Just be honest. If your claim is you are genuinely doing the due diligence to review all phones the same, then you really need to live up to that. You can't spend a couple weeks with an Xperia 1 Mark III in mostly pre-release software in a beta build that may or may not be coming to the United States in its current form, shoot a handful of low-effort camera comparisons, and then complain about features that don't work that absolutely work on the phone. Because we also know you're going to follow up every single Samsung device but you'll have made a conclusive review on a phone like the Xperia under embargo. And will we ever see these million subscriber channels really go back to, in earnest, showcase what's changed or what's evolved or what's improved on an Xperia? And I don't believe they will. So if you're claiming some kind of objectivity, but you're not expending the same effort, then stop. I think you're hurting gadget commentary. So on that note, I am over time now. This stream has been so frustrating. I'm going to be calling Spectrum as soon as I'm off the stream. I do have one last announcement, and I'm stoked to see them in the stream today. I had a page up that would have been more fun to look at, but I've already borked the recovery of this stream after reboot once. 2 weeks ago, we kicked off a contest. I'm working with a startup that's trying to build a platform to connect content creators and viewers across more social media. I'm working with them. I'm really excited. I'm hoping that this platform can grow and evolve. But we had a contest. We're giving away a $150 Amazon gift card. And this morning, we picked a winner this morning. So this was, anyone who sort of submitted and joined the platform and put in some social media info just to kind of look at what a leaderboard would look like for people who engage across different social media places. And I'm excited to announce that Simon Says Hypno. We pulled a random draw. Simon Says Hypno. You have won a $150 Amazon gift card. So off stream, because this stream is going to die on me again anyway, I'll catch your info, and I'll make sure the folks over at Fan Fund hook you up. But I definitely want to thank everyone who participated, and it was a fascinating look at how people interact with me and with each other on social media. So I'm hoping we can start using that as the backbone for this service. It was really, really cool. So again, thank you everybody who participated. Simon, it's coming your way. I'll follow up with you off stream. And on that note, let's get the F out, because this is driving me crazy. And thank you for everyone who did hang in there for one of the most infuriating streams I think I've ever done. This is awful. So thanks so much for everybody tuning in, showing up, hanging in there, participating in a great live chat. Again, making fun of my connection at my expense, because definitely deserved. And let's take some of these conversations offline too. I feel more needs to be said about the current state of reviewing, a relationship with reviewers, and how platforms like YouTube can mess up. So have a great week, and I'll catch y'all on the next stream.